Jesus Christ, that direct. Like, oh my god, I so much happened. I don't even know where to. I mean, okay, you know what? I think that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically go through this direct. I'm going to skip through it, and I'm not going to do it all in real time, but I might as well just talk about what they brought up in order, because, like, God, there's so much that they announced. This was one of the best Nintendo Directs that they've done in a long time, I think. Although, I have waited a few hours since they posted this for a number of reasons. Mainly, I had to like calm down and kind of get my bearings since I had to wake up pretty early. But I've also been doing some research on the side about some of the things they maybe didn't talk about in the direct, and we'll get to that at the end. So let's focus first on just what was in the direct. And okay, I remember when I put out my predictions video before they officially, put out their first trailer for the Switch 2. I was skeptical that they would even attempt a new Mario Kart game. And like, cuz like this still blows my mind every time it gets brought up. Like Mario Kart 8 is the fifth best-selling game of all time. And like, so on one hand, it makes sense that they would be like, you've got to capitalize on that. It's the only reason I was skeptical is because, like, how do you top that necessarily? And I mean, apparently, the way you top that is by going just all in and adding so much crazy stuff to this. Like, this looks like an amazing take on the Mario Kart formula. I mean, hell, it's like an entirely new formula for Mario Kart, really. Because, like, the whole gimmick of this is that it's now, like, open world, and they can actually, like, oh, I need to find the point in the video where they talk about it. Yeah, like, as the... like, okay, they've added wall riding, they've added grinding, there's different like cart types. And then yeah, it's this gigantic open world now, like Mario Kart game, where all of the tracks are actually like in this singular gigantic like environment, and you just go from like, oh my god, this is so insane. Yeah, it's like Forza Mario Kart, which is like oh my god. And like, you can actually see a lot of the tracks from this. Like you can tell there's a bunch of like classic SNES style tracks up there. Obviously you got your Bowser volcano area, your snowy area, a couple of desert, tundra, badlands areas, coasts. Like I'm curious just how many tracks are in this. And like that's the thing is that they also talk about how like you can literally just like drive from track to track going off road and forming like because like there's Grand Prix where you go across specific tracks, but I imagine you could probably make like custom Grand Prix where you're just driving from one track to the other, and there's like the elimination sort of pseudo battle royale mode. But point being, I think they've managed to find a way to top Mario Kart 8. Not to mention, yeah, they show a lot of these crazy power-ups that are, like, very different from prior games. Like, yeah, you got the bullet bill and stuff. And then, like, yeah, Birdo just drives into a truck, Mario eats a hamburger, and changes their costume, I guess? Like, and there's also kart customization still. And, oh my god, Waluigi in a suit. Yeah, no, I cannot wait to try this out. I think that this is an amazing launch game for the Switch 2. Like, this is a great way to start off the presentation, I think. And, yeah, no. Now, to be fair, there is a catch to this whole Mario Kart thing, but again, I'm going to talk about that at the end when we get to the parts that they didn't mention. So, after that... So yeah, so then they moved on to the rather, infamous C button that everybody's been talking about. And this seems to basically just be essentially like a built-in Discord feature, where they're just talking about, like voice chat. That they show off a video camera later on, and you could do game streaming and everything. It's okay. I mean, I don't know how many people are actually going to ever use this. I mean, they do show off, like, later on in the video. Because, like, obviously you've got game streaming. But then in certain games, like I think they showed a Mario Party bit later, where you can have people's like faces show up in the game, and so like that I could see being used for a couple of gimmicky features, throughout the Switch 2's life cycle. But it's the kind of thing where I just don't think it's going to get used by many people very seriously when you have alternatives like Discord. Like I would rather just play Discord on my phone when I'm playing Switch or something rather than rather than using this sort of in-game system. Plus, to be honest, they're very honest about the frame rates that they showed. But yeah, so moving on to more of the actual hardware, I think 1080p screen makes sense. 120 FPS is what really surprises me. Obviously, not every game is going to run at 120 FPS. Nintendo tends to push the boundaries of their hardware pretty hard. So who knows what they're going to end up doing, but the fact that some games are going to be able to reach 120, that makes me hope that 60 is going to be considered like the minimum for this console. Because like on the Switch 1, we had lots of games that were clearly targeting 30, like Breath of the Wild, and they didn't quite make it. But if they're going to be trying to shoot for like 120 in like their main games, that gives me hope that they're going to have at least some room to actually like make these games run at decent frame rates. Not to mention, this also says a lot about the potential Switch upscaled games, which I think they talk about a little bit more later. But yeah, I mean, most of the hardware stuff we already knew. Basic Joy-Con stuff. I think the Joy-Cons being bigger is nice, having bigger buttons. Also, it makes actually using the Joy-Cons a lot nicer. The mouse functionality is also pretty cool. I forget when they talk about that. Oh yeah, having the USB slot at the top, I mean, that just makes so much sense. I always thought it was so silly how they put the port at the bottom on the Switch 1, and then made it basically impossible to charge the thing while playing in tabletop mode. So having it at the top, I think, makes a lot more sense, just in general. The storage capacity, 256 isn't a lot, to be perfectly honest. But on the other hand, it's also worth remembering that Nintendo doesn't tend to bloat out their games insanely hugely. Like, I think, I can't remember, but I think the Tears of the Kingdom was only like 16 gigabytes or something like that. Like, compare that to like any Call of Duty game released in the last 10 years, and that's a fraction. So like, yeah, 256, not a ton of space in the grand scheme of things, but in context, I think that it's actually a decent amount of storage. And this also, I think, is a pretty noteworthy thing. I like that the dock actually does more than just kind of act as a USB hub, because that implies that they can really kind of overclock this thing when it's docked, which I think was the intent with the Switch 1. I just don't think it ended up working out very well. So I think the dock is really meant to help, again, maintain those more stable frame rates. Then they talk about this sort of weird demo game, and it's not even included in the fact that this isn't a pack-in game is kind of insane. Who's going to buy this? I don't know who's buying this. Like, it's got some mini games, I guess, but like, just play Mario Party. Like, I don't know what that is. And then yeah, it's got micro SD card stuff. This actually Switch 2 Pro controller. I mean, it's mostly the same stuff, but I think that having the GR and GL button would because of course Nintendo has to be weird about their naming scheme, but having these be explicit, just customizable buttons That's actually kind of rad. The fact that you could use that for like, oh, like I'll have like a dedicated button for like Splatoon or Monster Hunter or something. Like, I wonder if you could even set up like macros. Like, if you could make it so it's like, oh, you press X and A together at the same time on the same frame. If you use this button, and like that could even be useful in like speed running. And so like, there's a lot of interesting little things about the hardware. But yeah, the hardware's mostly stuff we already knew. Um, but yeah, so then we just talked more about Switch 2 games. Then we got it's backwards compatible, and then they talked about Switch 2 edition games. And so the idea here is that you can upgrade from the Switch 1 version. So like you can't just play the Switch 1 version if you want, but if you want to get uh like more features, then you can get the Switch 2 edition, and that's like where this face cam stuff comes in. But they didn't talk about the price for that, so that's another thing that I kind of want to do some research on after we get through the main presentation. Um, and then they also talked about like this like Zelda GPS thing. I don't. That's just really funny to me. I again, this is just more like this I could see actually being used where you're sharing creations between people, but like all of this other stuff with like the app and using Zelda GPS and the built-in voice chat stuff, I don't see anybody realistically using that past the first like year. Hell, past the first month of the console's lifespan. Nobody's gonna be using that stuff. Um, Though, yeah, more levels on Kirby. I mean, hey, I'm not opposed to that. So yeah, so this is one of the more interesting ones that gives me hope for more higher frame rate games on Switch 2, because they mentioned explicitly that this will run at like 4K 60 FPS on quality mode, or 1080 120 FPS. And so like if this is the frame rate that they're shooting for on first party games, like that gives me a lot of hope, because like even if it's a slightly dipping under 60 fps, that's like dipping from 60 to 50 is a lot more reasonable than dipping from like 30 to 20, like, you know what I mean? Hell, even dipping from like 30 to 25, right? Like if the baseline that every first party Switch game is at least 1080 60, like that should be the baseline in the year 2025, you know. But the other thing though that I kind of just glossed over is they also confirmed that the mouse controls can be used for shooters, which I think, like, I feel like this means that the Switch 2 is, weirdly enough, going to have the best shooter controls out of any console. And I mean, like, I know some people will swear by twin stick shooters, and like, you know, I'm sure you can do a lot with that, but I've always personally not liked playing first person shooters, or third person shooters for that matter, with twin stick. I need a mouse. And I think that the Switch 2 explicitly supporting that, like I've never gotten into Splatoon, for example, because Splatoon, like, obviously, it's got the gyro, which helps a little bit, but you know, if I can play Splatoon and Metroid with mouse controls, that's gonna make me so happy in particular, and I hope that uh, I hope that that helps more people be able to get into like those franchises and stuff. In fact, I kind of hope that they port the entire Prime series to Switch 2, because then, you know, being able to play Prime 1, 2, and 3 with mouse controls, that could be really awesome. But yeah, then we got this sort of this is kind of another like gimmick game. I mean, it looks kind of cool, but this is like an ARMS tier game. In fact, this is kind of, a lot of people were joking that after ARMS they would release legs, and we kind of get like the opposite, if you know. But yeah, it's an interesting looking game. It's definitely creative with it using both mouse controllers simultaneously, because like there's not really any kind of game that uses two mice at the same time per player. But honestly, the game looks kind of cheap, and the concept, again, it's a neat concept, it's creative. I think it could be a bit of fun, but unless this is a pack-in game, which I don't think it is, uh I don't know how many people are actually going to be playing this for very long. Like, I expect this to have about as long of a lifespan as ARMS, if that. It might be fun to play. That's right. Yeah, it's not even coming out at launch. It's coming out over the summer. So like, yeah, I don't know who's like hyped for that. It again, it seems interesting. Maybe it's just not for me. I don't know. Then we of course start going over. Of course, Elden Ring is going to be on the Switch too. Of course, Elden Ring Switch 2. This is like this is like how the Switch 1 got Skyrim to kind of show that, like, oh yeah, we got a lot of big things on this. Yeah, of course they're going to put Elden Ring on the Switch 2. Like, there was never a doubt in my mind about that. Hades 2 also. I mean, I wasn't Hades like already on the Switch, so like this kind of was a no-brainer, you know. Capcom bringing Street Fighter 6. I don't know what this exclusive mode thing, like a motion control fighting game, sounds like the worst thing ever, but who knows? It's Nintendo. They always do that kind of stuff. But yeah, Street Fighter 6 makes sense. Demon X Machina, all pretty obvious things to put in. Split Fiction, I'm a little surprised by since it's so new, but I mean, hey, I'll take it. I've heard nothing but good things. I haven't had a chance to play it myself, of course, but yeah, no, it's super super creative and fun looking game, and I think that also like the Switch is very like is arguably the most co-op oriented console with like the whole Joy-Con and everything. So like if you can play this by just handing your friend a Joy-Con, like this is kind of the perfect game for the Switch, if anything. Got EA Sports, so skip. Hogwarts Legacy, skip. Tony Hawk, I mean, again, kind of a no-brainer to port this to Switch 2 as long as it can run it, and it looks like it can run it just fine. So yeah, I mean, I'll take some Tony Hawk action, sure. Um, Hitman, kind of surprised, but it's actually been out for a while now, so the math checks out. And they teased the James Bond game that they're working on, but we literally just get this, so kind of nothing to talk about there. Bravely Default. I never played Bravely Default personally. I'm sure it's fun to get that on Switch 2 in HD. Yakuza, same thing. Like these are kind of like skips for me, just because I haven't played those games, so I'm not as familiar. Um, then we get this, which is not insanely surprising, but still kind of cool to see. That we're getting, just like how in for Breath of the Wild we got Age of Calamity with the sort of flashback to 100 years ago with them fighting Calamity Ganon. Now we're getting the flashback to tens of thousands of years ago, to when Zelda went back in time, and now we're getting, a Muso game with Rauru and Zelda and everybody else that you can play as. So that I think is really fun. Obviously, it depends on like how much you like those games. I thought Age of Calamity was fun. The main issue being that it didn't run very well. So I'm hoping that this runs a lot better. And in fact, I hope that Age of Calamity in general runs a lot better on Switch too. So well, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that looks fun. I think that it's a fun concept to kind of visit that period in the history, and then have that Muso style gameplay. Because I do think the Hyrule Muso games are the most interesting. But yeah, so this I think is the next like really big announcement that they went over, which is the GameCube stuff. The Nintendo Switch Online was always kind of a nebulous thing when it first came out, but I think that they've only been increasing the value of NSO and the expansion pack and everything, and like adding GameCube games is one of the big things people wanted. I mean, we got Wind Waker, we got Soul Calibur, we got F-Zero being mentioned for the first time in forever, and not to mention, standard like customizing your controls and everything, GameCube controller. I think that's pretty cool. And in fact, it's even got like an extra Z button on the left side, which is kind of funny, as well as all of the standard stuff. So like, I think that's actually kind of cool. Um, But yeah, I think GameCube is something just a lot of people have been waiting for. Deltarune. Again, I haven't actually played Deltarune, but maybe I will now that it's on Switch. It's something that I've been meaning to get around to, but I just never did. So I think having Deltarune 3+4 arriving day one on Switch 2, that's a great pull. Borderlands is kind of fallen off. Civilization 7, I don't know who's playing this on a console. Come on, like who plays that on a console, really? Sports games, 2K. This game kinda, I keep forgetting. I swear I've watched this direct like 3 times, and every single time I forget that this game was like a thing. I mean, I don't know what it is about it. It's a surviving crafting sort of game, I think. The sort of genre just kind of rolls off my eyes at this point. Enter the Gungeon, that's always a great one. Having that be, Enter the Gungeon 2 on Switch, that's always fun. Astroneer, this one's kind of outside my wheelhouse. Cyberpunk is ambitious. It's really funny to think, like, when this game came out back in 2020, and how terribly it ran on even the latest consoles, and now we're getting a port to the Switch. That is ambitious, to say the least. I mean, it looks fine based on the footage they show, but I am curious to see how well that runs. And 7 Remake, again, not terribly expected, but it makes sense. So, No, okay. I gotta talk about this for a second. During this sort of sizzle reel, out of nowhere, they just casually drop Hollow Knight Silksong out of nowhere, coming out 2025, and it's literally just here for like 3 seconds, and then it's gone. And it's like, what? You're not gonna highlight. So many people have been waiting for a Hollow Knight news for so long, and we're just gonna get 3 seconds of footage and then go to some farming game? Oh my god. I mean, there isn't, I guess, much to talk about because all we get is 2025, so hopefully it doesn't get delayed again. Wild Hearts is probably the most unexpected game out of all of these. Like, Wild Hearts, like, I talked about it in one of my previous videos about, the controls for action games and stuff, and, like, I think Wild Hearts, it came close to replicating the feel of Monster Hunter in a lot of ways, but it just didn't quite get there. And it kind of was abandoned not long after launch, so I'm kind of shocked to see it ported to Switch 2. So I guess we'll see how that plays, but I don't have very high hopes for it. And then, yeah, we're just going through the sizzle reel. Okay, let's see here. Professor Layton, Human Fall Flat. And then we get to this. And this had me and my friends freaking out so much. Because, you're watching it and you're like, who is that? What is going on? I don't recognize any of these things. But then you start hearing the music. And you start going, wait a minute. That orchestral stuff sounds familiar. Did she just say blood? And then, just a few seconds later, after we get through this intro, it suddenly cuts to From Software to then a Victorian-looking city, and everybody's like, whoa, are we getting Bloodborne on the Switch too? Like Bloodborne 2 or something. And no, this is called Duskbloods. And I think that it's pretty obvious that this is all but, like, this is Bloodborne in all but name. Like, this could not be more obviously a Bloodborne spiritual successor than, I mean, I don't even know. Like, This is so clearly inspired by Bloodborne. Like obviously a lot of FromSoft games have a very similar vibe to them, but this is very clearly going for that Bloodborne vibe. I mean, hell, you can even see like most of the characters are wielding melee weapons and like a gun in their offhand, just like in Bloodborne. You know, literally right there. Although now we're dealing with vampires, I guess, instead of like werewolves and stuff, and there's still eldritch horrors and monsters and all that good stuff. So the other thing, and I guess I'll start talking about some of the stuff that's come to light after the direct, is that they have revealed that this is apparently more multiplayer focused. It's been described as PvPvE, and so I'm interested to see what that actually means. Because, like, I mean, technically speaking, all FromSoft games have been, like, multiplayer, pretty much. Because, like, they all have some online functionality to begin with. So, I'm curious what this even is. Because they don't really show, like, players fighting each other. If anything, they show a little bit that kind of looks like it could be co-op, like Night Rain. But again, this also doesn't look like Night Rain either. Like, is that a player? Like, I don't know. There's so much that I have questions about that I'm sure they're gonna release more info down the line. And I've seen some people get turned off by it being supposedly more multiplayer focused, and like I honestly don't get that. Like I'm excited for Night Rain, which is obviously much more co-op focused. So like another more multiplayer focused Bloodborne style FromSoft game. Like sign me up. I don't know what people are so concerned about. So I'm really curious to see where this goes and what actually is going to be coming of it, because that looks, I mean, it looks like Bloodborne 2 on Switch. Like I think Sony, like there's been this joke going around that Sony like lost the master to Bloodborne and that's why they haven't ported it forward. And it's like, something must have gone wrong when Sony drops the ball so hard that even Nintendo picks it up. Like, I don't know what's happening, but we somehow got Bloodborne 2 on Switch before, Sony. It's insane. And then, yeah, they said that Miyazaki is going to talk more about the game on the 4th, so hopefully we'll get more info about that soon, but goddamn. And then, of course, the other, like, the last part of this direct is just banger after banger. Like, this... I have been such a huge fan of Kirby's Air Ride. Like, I still have that back on the GameCube. And that was actually when they first showed off the GameCube NSO feature. I was like, oh, maybe I could finally play Kirby's Air Ride again, on the Switch. And lo and behold, little did I know that we would just be getting a straight up Kirby's Air Ride 2. And like, they better have City Escape. Or not City Escape, City Trial, or whatever it's called, in this. Because, like, goddamn, that is why you play Kirby's Air Ride, is for City Trial. And, like, I can imagine, like, just based on how much they're doing for Mario Kart, like, imagine what they could do for Kirby's Air Ride. They could do so many cool... Like, imagine if Cityscape is, like... Or City... Oh, God, I keep calling it City Escape. But what if City Trials is, like... a full-on, like, battle royale mode with, like, dozens of players. Being able to just play it online, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Having the city being this big, sprawling thing. There's so many cool things they could do with this. And it makes me sad that this is just, like, an animated teaser. Because I really want to see more of that. But yeah, and then finally, they close out the show with their big first-party platformer, Donkey Kong. Which I have to admit, again, this caught me off guard. I did not think that we were going to get like a major first party 3D Donkey Kong for, like, I guess it's not technically launch, but like near launch. Because, like, Mario would be the obvious choice. Just another Mario Odyssey style game. And, like, this does feel very Odyssey. Just based on, like, its art style and stuff. But, like, clearly they're focusing a lot more on, like, destructible environments. which I think is a really interesting sort of way to give a twist to the formula that's very uniquely DK compared to Mario. So, like, I think that this actually works really well as, like, a sort of new twist on the Nintendo platformer genre, focusing more on the destructible environment and stuff, while still having that sort of open world exploration that Odyssey had. So, yeah, like, this is, I think, a great entry for you know, Switch launch lineup. Like, this, and plus, it looks like there's still even some classic 2D style gameplay as well. So you got a little mix of both. And, you know, the redesign on DK, when I first saw it in that Mario Kart trailer a while ago, I'm not sure if I was sold on it, but I think that seeing it in its proper context with this animation style, I'm totally okay with this new take on DK. I think that he looks great. He looks adorable. I think it's funny that he finally put on pants. But yeah, no, this looks great, I think, and I think that with this, Mario Kart, the GameCube stuff, backwards compatibility with Switch One, there's so many good things that Switch is going to have just at the very start of their generation, and then yeah, announced it for July. So about a month after the Switch. Oh, sorry. About a month after the Switch came out. So yeah, so that was pretty great. And then yeah, that is pretty much the end of it. They just kind of talk about how there's going to be a bundle, and very notably, they do not talk a lot of prices in this trailer. So let's talk about some of the things that they didn't mention in the Direct, because that is where things get a little bit hairier. So yeah, if we pull up the Switch 2 website, we can find that the Switch 2 is retailing for $450 or $500 if you get it with Mario Kart. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I think that a lot of people were expecting $400, $450. I mean, $450 is not that bad. Don't get me wrong. I think $450 is reasonable, especially if this thing is going to be capable of pumping out, you know, 4K 60 FPS Metroid gameplay. I'm hoping that that means that this has some real kick behind it, and it's got a lot of decent features behind it. So I think that 450, again, higher than I was hoping, but reasonable. And having Mario Kart as a pack-in for 500, I think makes a ton of sense. But let's talk about Mario Kart, because they have also revealed a hot $80 MSRP, and the asterisk is here. That it's literally, I looked it up. It's literally just explaining what MSRP means. Yeah, $80. That's not okay. That's not okay, Nintendo. It looks amazing. I think that this Mario Kart game looks great. $80 is not okay. And I mean, it could just be a sign of the times with, you know, not to get too much off topic, but the state of the economy, inflation, tariffs, all you can assign a million different blames to it. But that's not great. Now, to be fair, it does get a little bit more nuanced than that, because we did see DK is apparently retailing for $70. So, is it just Mario Kart that's hitting 80? Because, like, well, yeah, DK is, I guess, a less popular franchise. Again, you know, need I remind you, Mario Kart is the 5th best-selling game series of all time, so they could just be trying to capitalize that. And, like, it could also just be that this is meant to try and sell consoles, because, like, you know, if Mario Kart's going to be $80 on its own, then why not buy the bundle and save $30 just, you know, without having to buy Mario Kart separately? Like, I feel like everybody's going to be buying the bundle. But it does make me worried if other, like, because, like, if DK is, like, the B-tier Nintendo franchise, does that mean that all of the A-tiers, like Mario and Zelda, are going to be 80 now? That's not good, Nintendo. I don't think that's okay. And, like, even then, so some places have been reporting that it could be 80 for just the digital version, and then if you want the physical version, then it's going to be 90. And that's unreasonable. That's not okay. And now, okay, now to be fair, from what I can find, this $90, 90 USD for physical is currently, as of the time of this recording, I think completely speculative. Because it's mostly based on this post that's obviously from the EU, where they're listing the digital version for 80 euros and the physical, I assume that's what physico means, for 90 euros. And the USD to euro translation is not quite, but nearly 1-to-1 these days. So I can see why people are going that this means that the listed price tag is just for the digital version and that the physical version could be even more. But again, there's no hard evidence to necessarily back up that will be the case in the US. It could just be that that's just a weird thing they're doing in the EU and that both versions are going to be $80 in the US. Or the most charitable interpretation of events that I have seen is that some people like on Reddit and stuff have pointed out that, like, you know, in the EU, and you know, Britain and Europe and whatnot, it's much more common, if not universal, to include tax in price tags. That's why things like quote unquote cost more in Europe than they do in like the US usually, but that's because they're including the price of tax with the cost. Whereas in the U.S., the tax is only included when you get to the register, so in order for a variety of reasons. So the most charitable interpretation that I've seen is that this is the tax included upcharge version of the prices, and that this is going to be $80 for the physical version in the US, and that we might get $70 for the digital version in the US as well. And that's, I mean, it's more reasonable, but more reasonable than completely unreasonable isn't really saying a whole lot. So, no, I'm not. I think it's pretty obvious why they didn't want to talk about this during the presentation. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't talk about the price tag, because while it is higher, these prices don't feel unreasonable. $450 for the console, $500 for the bundle. That, I think these are normal prices that they could have shown during the direct. But I completely understand why they didn't want to reveal the $80 MSRP for Mario Kart, because, oh, that is rough, and I'm scared, honestly, and I think that's going to turn off a lot of people. Like, honestly, I think that it could still be worth getting the Switch 2 at launch with the bundle, because then you're getting Mario Kart World for $50. And then you got the GameCube, the Sega Genesis, all the good NSO stuff. You got backwards compatibility Switch. You will have plenty to tide you over, just with Mario Kart and all the other stuff. But after that, if every game by default is going to be $70, like, and that's the ideal scenario. If we're going to be getting first-party games, if the next Mario or Zelda is $80 at launch, I hope that Nintendo is listening to the feedbacks. Already, people have been freaking out about this online. A lot of people are not happy about this, and rightfully so. I think that I really hope that Nintendo kind of sees the backlash to this. And like, I've also heard that, and again, this is all kind of things are moving very fast right now. There's a lot of information being flung around fast and loose. So some people are saying that the games are actually a lot cheaper in Japan itself. So it could be related to like export and import costs, which means it's related to tariffs, and you know what that means. So that could be a big part of it as well. But yeah, that is. I really hope that this speculation that it's 80 digital, 90 physical is just speculation, and that at bare minimum, it should be 70 digital, 80 physical. And even that is still being rough. Now, I have talked about it in the past. I've talked about, digital versus physical, and how it's really not as big of a deal as many people will make it out to be. Especially when it comes to like games preservation. You can go watch that video in its entirety if you want more details on my opinion on that. So like, I'm probably going to keep buying digital, and if it is true that digital games end up being $10 cheaper than the alternative, especially if it means staying at 60, then I'll be okay. But obviously, if you much prefer having physical games, that's rough, and I don't know what to tell you. Switch 2 might Like this, because like, and it's such a pain because everything about this conference was so good. Like I love seeing all the Mario Kart footage. The streaming footage was a bit rough in its honesty, but hey, like this was so good, and all the other games, the Totally Not Bloodborne 2, the tease at Silksong, Elden Ring, all of these games coming to Switch 2 look so great, and I think that so many people are not going to be able to experience them because of just, I guess, the state of the economy right now. Like this is rough. And so yeah, like I said, I guess I'll keep you posted if I find out more information in the coming days. Hopefully, it does turn out that it's not as bad as the EU listings are making it out to be. But I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. June 5th also was way sooner than I expected. A lot of people were expecting, like, like winter, or at least a standard like November launch. Hell, even some people that thought it could launch during the summer were not expecting June 5th. So I mean, having it come out sooner is cool, I guess. I think that's great to see, but again, I don't know how much it matters if so many people are not going to be able to experience it just due to being priced out of their range due to these absurd costs. Like I said, the bundle at least seems like a decent deal. I'm probably going to try and go for the bundle. I'll probably try to hit up pre-orders when that comes available. We'll see how it goes. Because at least this is like reasonably priced. But yeah, I'm concerned about the future of Nintendo, man. Like I don't know what to say. But yeah, so, and I'm curious what you guys have to say about this. I mean, like I said, with the presentation itself, I thought had a lot of good stuff in it. So I'm curious to see your opinions. So as always, I am eager to continue the conversation in the comments down below. Feel free to let me know what you think about the prices and your hopes for the Switch 2, or possibly regrets, depending on how things turn out, down below in the comments. And if you like the video, make sure to leave me a like. If you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you can get notified. And until next time, I guess I'll see you guys later.